Hey, welcome to this week's study guide. As we get into Daniel, this week, of course, was designed to set up Daniel so you know historically, morally, and spiritually what's going on before the fall to Babylon. And so we talked about a lot of things that was going on in the life of Judah. And we talked about how God had spared Judah from Assyria, but ultimately how Judah falls and falls hard to Babylon. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that in our study guide, but I hope that you have a good idea now what sets up the book of Daniel. And so let's dig right in. We're going to talk first about Hezekiah. By most counts, Hezekiah was a good king. He was not like Manasseh before him. If we're talking about A, B, and C chairs, Manasseh was an F chair. He was evil, he was disgusting and vile, and certainly the people of Israel certainly suffered because of him. But Hezekiah was a good king. But remember, good and great are two different things. And so we recall that Hezekiah was a good guy. We talked about that a little bit, but here's a key verse out of 2 Chronicles 32:25. Hezekiah did not make return according to the benefit done to him, for his heart was proud. Therefore wrath came upon him and Judah and Jerusalem. So here we have the sin of one man, this imperfect guy who was a good guy, but obviously not a perfect man, and we see that it caused all kinds of problems. And so here's the question number one. What lessons should we take from Hezekiah's life? Spend a little time talking about that. We'll come back to that. Well, as we talked about last week, borrowing from last week's message, we can sit in an A chair, B chair, or C chair, and certainly Hezekiah waffled between the A and B chair. But he did not finish well. Even though God extended his life, he messed it up. He frittered it away, so to speak. And so he led his people to destruction because he did not finish well. Here is a chair of compromise because his heart had pride in it. And we see that he brings the Babylonians in, he shows them the treasures. It was very unwise. Instead of saying, we'll depend upon God, we don't have to trust you and create an alliance with you, he brought them in because he wanted the security of having Babylon on his side. That's not what God instructed him to do. It was unwise, it was foolish, it was full of pride, and it cost him and his family, it cost Judah, and it cost Jerusalem. So there are lots of lessons we can learn. We need to finish well. We need to make sure that we don't sit in the B chair, because being good is not good enough for the generations that come after us, as we talked about last week. And so let us learn a harsh lesson from Hezekiah. Let's run our race with endurance. Let's finish it well. And let's make sure that we stay in that A chair, so to speak. Let's go to the second question. What were the moral, spiritual characteristics of Babylon? How have we been invaded, in a sense, in the United States, by Babylon as reflected by these characteristics in our society? We see that Judah was literally invaded by Babylon. We've been invaded by a Babylon spirit, so to speak. We've even seen a movie out right now called Babylon, where there's all kinds of immorality and really a reflection of what Babylon was all about. These are people who worshiped themselves, or worshiped each other. They wanted to do things their own way. They were full of pride and arrogance in their culture. And that same culture invades and takes over Judah. And so people like Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, and Daniel have to live in that culture. Today, I want you to think about the culture of these United States. I want you to think about how it's abandoned God. I want you to think about the results of that and some of the craziness that we're dealing with because of that reality. And so, do we live in a culture today that honors God? Do we live in a culture that worships itself? Well, you can answer those things for yourself. But be careful. Just because Babylon has invaded does not give us permission to live like Babylonians. That's a dangerous place to be. Let's go to the third question. God can use foreign, godless nations to bring judgment on his people if they refuse to repent. What could that look like today? Discuss that for a minute. If God was to use a foreign nation to bring judgment upon the United States, what might that look like? We've seen throughout history that God can use foreign nations. Certainly Babylon coming in and destroying Judah and Jerusalem. We see many years later in AD 70 that Jerusalem was totally destroyed and Judah was totally destroyed by the Romans. We see that in World War II. We see that bad leaders cause all kinds of destruction throughout Europe and the East. And we can see that today, if China decided to go to war with us, if Russia decided to go to war with us, it's unimaginable what kind of damage and destruction would come from that. We, like Israel, like Judah, tend to feel a false sense of security. And we need to be careful because God is loving, but He is also just. And because He loves us, sooner or later, He'll correct us. We don't want that. And so He's given us the call. Be right. Live righteously. Spread the gospel so that your culture and your world can be godly and be blessed. I hope that you've enjoyed this time. You might want to discuss more from this message today. I certainly hope that you'll be involved in a small group as we study Daniel together, beginning next week with Daniel chapter 1. God bless you.